Hello and welcome back to the Shack Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, June 2nd. My name is Ethan Frank. And just a reminder, we are sponsored today by theodshack.com. Make sure you're checking out all the new content going on up on the OD Shack. And today, I am joined by the lovely Jake Mozarsky. Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Today, I am going to be prompting Jake on the NHL. Jake is our resident NHL fanatic and expert on the NHL's return to play coming up here soon. So why don't we get right into it, Jake? So Jake, you want to just go over what's happening and what's going to be going on in the NHL in the next few weeks?
Yeah, definitely. So starting in mid-June, I'm pretty sure, as long as precautions go on, teams are allowed to return to their training camps and training facilities. Then the NHL is going to jump right into their playoffs. And since it was a tight race for the playoffs, they're going to go 24 teams. And the top 4 seeds in each conference are going to play for seeding to get those 4 seeds. And then the rest of the teams, 5 through 12 in each conference, are going to play a play-in rounds to get into the actual playoffs. And there are going to be 2 host cities. And we don't know what those are going to be yet, but there are 8 possible destinations. One will be for the East, one will be for the West.
All right, so it seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
So 24 teams, which is more than you would see during a regular year. So pretty interesting stuff. Should be very entertaining. So before we get into the playoffs, and we're going to do some predictions, a lot of that kind of stuff, what does this mean for teams that were not part of those top 24 teams?
Yeah, for them, they are allowed to return for their practice facilities, but they know their season's not going to be on anymore. Like, they didn't contend in the regular season and knew they'd have no chance in the playoffs. And the league pretty much said, look, you'll have it next year, but you are allowed to open and have those workouts like a regular team that's still in it. But they'll look on to 2021.
All right. So why don't we get right into it? Jake, give me your 3 favorites to win the 2020 Stanley Cup.
All right, so in no order, but the first favorite is the St. Louis Blues. I mean, they won the Cup last year pretty easily. They won in Game 7 against the Boston Bruins, but if you watch that game, it was absolute domination. They were in last place in January 2019, and since then, they've just been on a roll. They've been winning so many games. They have the most points in the NHL this year, and they are just from top to bottom. They're stacked, and they have a lot of goons that could do the dirty work, as a hockey fan would say, and they have a lot of skilled players. My second one is the Boston Bruins, who lost the Stanley Cup to the Blues last year. The Bruins have so many skilled players, from Brad Marchand to David Pastrnak to Jake DeBrusk, and they have goaltending and Tuukka Rask, and Boston always knows how to bring it. And then my third is the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche, unlike the Bruins and Blues, they have a bit less experience, but out of these 3 teams, they probably have the best player in Nathan MacKinnon. And they have players like Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, and Gabriel Landeskog, who all come together well. And they have a pretty good goalie in Philip Grubauer, so they are a team to watch.
Now give me some sleepers that you think could possibly make a deep run in the playoffs.
Okay, so the first one's the Florida Panthers. I mean, they have one of the best goalies in hockey in Sergei Bobrovsky. And I know, Ethan, you don't watch hockey, but
I watch a little bit of hockey. Don't slight me there.
Okay. You do watch a bit of hockey. I mean, but you could see, like, when there's a good goalie, a team could go really far. And Sergei Bobrovsky always brings his A game. Last year, when he was on the Columbus Blue Jackets before moving in the offseason, due to his goaltending, they beat the best team in NHL regular season history, people say, 4-0, and it wasn't even close. So if Bobrovsky could be that goaltender that he always is, I could see them going really far.
That was against the Lightning, correct? They swept the Lightning.
Yeah, exactly. And the Lightning finished with the most points in regular season history last year and were the team of the decade. So
wow,
anything could happen. Yeah. My second one is the Arizona Coyotes. Just so much speed on this team. Taylor Hall, Michael Grabner, Derek Stepan brings experience. They just have a lot of good players and gel well. And they have 2 good goalies. So that's my second one. And then the third is my New York Rangers. I mean, they have two.
Big homer pick right there.
Big homer pick right there. With the Rangers, they scored the most goals in the NHL this year. They are young and inexperienced, but that could be changed. And at the same time, they have 2 of the best players in the league. Artemi Panarin, who's an absolute heart candidate, and Mika Zibanejad, who had 45 goals this year. The Rangers are young, have a great goalie, are quick, and can score. So if they have some good defense too, they could go pretty far.
All right, let's continue on this train. So, what do you think is the best matchup of the play-in round? And
I'm
it's a
gonna
5-game series, correct?
Yeah, it's a 5 game series. Yeah. I'm gonna go with the 5 seed in the East, the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the 12 seed Montreal Canadiens. Now, most hockey fans, when they look at this, they think it's pretty simple. The Penguins are a great team, really talented. They would have been the best team in the East if they didn't really slump at the end of the year. But the Montreal Canadiens have Carey Price, and like I said, goaltending means everything in the playoffs. And Carey Price, the Penguins were one of the teams to vote against this proposal because Carey Price will be rested, and he's so hard to score on. And since it's a 5 game series, it makes it so much harder. So I think that's a very interesting matchup.
All right. So why don't we go through some predictions now? Why don't we go through the play-in round? What do you have in the East and the West, Jake?
All right, so we'll start out in the West. So I'm just going to give a sentence in between just why, I guess, or a couple sentences. So in the West, my first matchup, I have the 5 seed Edmonton Oilers over the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, a lot of people think the Blackhawks are good with Dominique Kubalik, Patrick Kane. Um, their goaltending is all right, but the Edmonton Oilers have two of the best players in the league in points, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. They're really hard to stop. So I have that. My second one is the Nashville Predators over one of my sleepers, which was the Arizona Coyotes. I was so torn with this one. It's just hard to pick. The Coyotes don't have a lot of experience besides Derek Stepan. Next, I have the 10 Minnesota Wild over the Vancouver Canucks, my first upset in the West. And that's because the Wild, they have good goaltending and a lot of experience, but at the same time, they're young. The Canucks haven't been in the playoffs. They have a great goalie in Jacob Markstrom, but besides that, they're really questionable. And then I have the Calgary Flames over the Winnipeg Jets because the Winnipeg Jets don't have any defense. In the East, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins over the Montreal Canadiens. I mentioned that that's a very entertaining matchup, but I think the Penguins are just a better team overall, and the Canadiens don't really have a right to be in the playoffs, and that gets to their head, especially with NHL analysts ripping on them every day, except for Carey Price. Then I have the Toronto Maple Leafs over the Columbus Blue Jackets. Maple Leafs just have too much power up front. I mean, John Tavares, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, they're a great team. The Blue Jackets weren't supposed to be in this spot. Then the Florida Panthers, one of my sleeper teams, over the bitter, hated rivals, New York Islanders. The Islanders.
That's another homer pick right there. Jake
That
just
is
wants the
another homer
Islanders
pick.
to lose.
Yeah, that is sort of another homer pick. But if you watch this year, the Islanders really slumped down the long run, and the Panthers really built up. And they have two great players in Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau. And Bobrovsky's a great goalie. And the Islanders had a great playoff run last year, losing in the second round to Carolina. But I don't think they could do it this year. And then the last one, and even this might come as a shocker to you. So the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. This looks so good for the Rangers on paper. Beat the Hurricanes 4-0 in the regular season. They have the two better players in Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. It's all gravy for the Rangers. It's supposed to be a rebuilding year for them. Somehow they made it in the playoffs. They have a better goalie, Igor Shesterkin or Henrik Lundqvist, whoever starts. He will be better than Peter Mrazek. But I'm going to go with the Hurricanes just because if I know I pick the Rangers, something might go wrong.
I could say that has happened before in the past. So probably a smart decision right there from Mr. Mozarsky. So tell me who you think the most important player is going to be in the play-in round, in both one in the West, one in the East.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So in the East, I'm going to go with Brady Shea of the Carolina Hurricanes. Or actually, no, I'm going to go with Dougie Hamilton of the Carolina Hurricanes because he's recently coming back from injury. The playoffs are going to be his first game in a while, like first real game. He was hurt for 2 months before the season ended. And the Rangers bring so much firepower. And Carolina, if they're going to have a chance to win the series, it's going to need to be from the defensive side. And in the West, my most important player is Connor McDavid. I mean, he's the best player in the league. And when he's on the ice, he makes a play happen every time. So if he could just get everybody around him and use that speed against the Blackhawks defense, which is older and not very quick, he's very important to that team.
I can't say I watch that much hockey, but I do know the name Connor McDavid, and I know he is very good at hockey. So that is something I can say. So now let's hear your predictions, Jake, for the quarterfinals.
All right, I'm going to go a bit quicker this time. I'm not going to really read the seedings, but to mention the 4 seeds, the top 4 seeds this time, I am actually just going to go on how they did in the regular season. So in the West, the 1 seed St. Louis Blues, 2 is Colorado Avalanche, 3 is Vegas Golden Knights, and 4 is Dallas Stars. And in the East, the 1 is the Boston Bruins, the 2 is Tampa Bay Lightning, 3 is Washington Capitals, and 4 is the Philadelphia Flyers. So let's get into it. So in the West, I have the Blues beating the Calgary Flames. The Blues are just so powerful up and down. The Flames don't really have a lot of strength besides Mark Giordano. Then I have the Colorado Avalanche beating the Minnesota Wild. The Wild are a possible sleeper team that I didn't mention, but I just don't see it happening. They're not that talented. They're more of a big team. They're more of a team that wins games 3-1 or 3-2. The Avalanche are a high-scoring team and a quick team if you watch them. Then I have the Vegas Golden Knights over the Nashville Predators. A lot of people have the Predators going out in the first round. I have them going out in the second. The Vegas Golden Knights are just a great team overall. And Nashville, like when you put it on paper, it's just not close. Then I have the Edmonton Oilers over the Dallas Stars. This is my one upset of this round because the Stars are a team that doesn't score a lot of goals. They're defensive. But when you have McDavid and Draisaitl for the Oilers, they're really hard to stop. Then in the East, I have the Boston Bruins over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Every team has a kryptonite. The Maple Leafs have lost to the Bruins in the playoffs the past 3 years. Let's just make that 4.
Wasn't would that be a rematch of the Eastern Conference Finals from last year?
It would be a rematch of actually the conference quarters.
Oh,
The Bruins, the Bruins beat the Hurricanes last year.
I just always remember the Bruins playing the Maple Leafs in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a very common matchup. I think you're recalling. I think it was 3 years ago when it was Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semis, and the Maple Leafs went up 4-1 in the third, and the Bruins came back and won in overtime.
I think that might be it. Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody knows that matchup. It's so common. And you know what happened in that game, and it happens every year. Just every team has a kryptonite. Then moving on, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning over the Florida Panthers. Lightning are just so good offensively and have a very good goalie, Andrei Vasilevsky. Then the Washington Capitals over the Carolina Hurricanes. I barely had the Carolina Hurricanes out of the first round. I didn't think they were going to make it out of the first round, but I did an anti-homer pick to sort of jinx it. But the Capitals are just a great team. And then the Philadelphia Flyers over the Pittsburgh Penguins. So this goes back to every team has a kryptonite. I think the Flyers actually break it. They're so talented on the offensive side with Travis Konecny, Kevin Hayes, Claude Giroux, Jacob Voracek. And the Penguins really slumped down the stretch, and I see that continuing, especially after getting exhausted by Carey Price.
All right. So who do you think is going to be key in the West and the East in the quarterfinals?
Yeah. So in the West, we're gonna go with David Perron. Perron was supposed to be a goon this year, but he had points after points after points, goals, assists, and he was an all-star for St. Louis, and he played really well. And Calgary is a pretty frisky team, pretty quick. Johnny Gaudreau, Mark Giordano on the other side, Sam Talbot. So it's going to be an interesting one, and Perron is that X factor on whether it's a 4-0 series or a 4-3 series that the Blues exhaust themselves and lose in the next round. And then in the East, I'm going to go with Alexander Ovechkin just because playoff Ovi. It's just
Never heard of him.
Yeah, never heard of him. Exactly. I wish I never heard of him, but there have been many times that the Rangers have lost to the Capitals in the playoffs. So Ovechkin, just with that shot, he's just so hard to stop. And Carolina's goaltending isn't the best. So if he could get his shot off, it should be high scoring and easy for them.
All right. That is great analysis right there, Jake. Now let's move on to the conference semifinals. What do we got?
Okay, so my big upset of probably the entire playoffs is that the St. Louis Blues, the reigning Stanley Cup champions, lose to the Edmonton Oilers, who are the 5 seed and had to play in the play-in round. I mentioned that Connor McDavid's a big X factor. Connor McDavid, best player in hockey, you know him. Probably everyone knows him that doesn't even follow the sport. And then they have Leon Draisaitl, who actually led the league in points this year. And St. Louis was a bit shaky on defense, and they're not a very fast team. They're a team that tries to hit you. They're a team that tries to pin you against the boards, but it's so hard to do that. It's just like I'm trying to make some sort of analogy. You can't catch something really fast. So that's my biggest upset of the playoffs. And then I have the Colorado Avalanche beating the Vegas Golden Knights. That just comes down to, I'm going to say inexperience here weighs over experience. Because even though this is technically the playoffs, it's going to be so different. There's no fans. And there's a different city and you're living in the same place and not allowed to go anywhere else. And that's going to have a toll on the Vegas Golden Knights, who are used to something more casual, I guess the word is. And the Avalanche are a young team and they're quick. So that's the West. And then in the East, I have the Boston Bruins over the Philadelphia Flyers. The Bruins are just so big, and the Flyers are a team that doesn't like to get hit. It's just like in basketball when someone gets fouled and then there's a whole fight over it, like James Harden, I guess. So who's the player that gets hit all the time and then everybody backs him up because he doesn't like getting hit? I'm not very good with basketball.
Mostly, I would say more star players. I think James Harden was a good example. But anytime a star player goes down, his teammates will rush to defend him and help him up.
Exactly. And so the Flyers are that team that gets really mad about that. And the difference between them, if a Bruin hits a Flyer, the Flyers are going to complain. If a Flyer hits a Bruin, that Flyer is going to get hit on the next shift. The Bruins are that team that just puts everyone down. And then I have the Tampa Bay Lightning over the Washington Capitals. The Lightning, Stamkos and Kucherov are just very good in score, and I'm not very sure about the Capitals goaltender, Braden Holtby.
All right, let's move on to the conference finals. Any more upsets here, Jake?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, many people would call this an upset. Like in the East, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are the 2 seed, beat the 1 Boston Bruins. But if you watch the NHL season, the Lightning really surged at the end of the year. They played really bad at the start of the year, then put together a little streak to get up there. And I think they get their revenge over the Bruins this year because 2 years ago, the Bruins had their number, and the Bruins had their number last year too. So I think this is a kryptonite. And I think the Bruins are a lot like the 2015 New York Rangers when the President's Trophy, which the Bruins look like they're going to do, but then lose in the conference finals. And then in the West, I have the Colorado Avalanche over the Edmonton Oilers. That's a pretty simple pick. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl are great players, but the Avalanche are better defensively.
All right, on to the Stanley Cup Finals. You want to go a little more in depth on this and really break it down, Jake?
Yeah, let's break it down. So the Stanley Cup, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Eastern Conference and the Colorado Avalanche in the Western Conference. So let's start with the best player. So the best player from the Tampa Bay Lightning is Nikita Kucherov. He is so good with the puck, has shifty dangles, can pass, can shoot, can really do anything for that team. And he's pretty good defensively too. And when they're on the power play, he's really hard to stop. And in for the Avalanche, it is Nathan MacKinnon, who's probably the second best player in the NHL, I'd say. He's young, he's quick. And the question with MacKinnon, he's coming off an injury, so is he going to be 100%? He should be by then, but you really never know. Hockey's a weird game, and the playoffs exhaust you. So those are the best players. And then let's just go on to positions really quick. So offense, I have to give it to the Lightning. I like Kucherov and Steven Stamkos. Steven Stamkos has a shot, which is really good, and then they have players like Andre Cirelli, Kevin Shattenkirk, who's actually a defenseman, but is very offensive with the puck. And I like that over McKinnon, Landeskog, Cale Makar, who's pretty offensive, and Mikko Rantanen. Then with defense, I like the Avalanche. The Avalanche have a younger defense and a quicker defense led by rookie Cale Makar, who's probably going to win Rookie of the Year this year. And the Lightning are a weird team. They're a bit more experienced on the defensive end. But again, like I mentioned, it's hard to bring experience into this when it's the playoffs that nobody knows. And then goaltending, obviously the Lightning. Andrei Vasilevsky's a top 5 goalie in the game, if not top 3. And that's better than Phil Grubauer, who was a backup last year.
All right. So who do we have winning this series, Jake?
Yeah, so we have the Tampa Bay Lightning winning over the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games.
Redemption for the Lightning.
Redemption for the Lightning. After last year, everything was meant to be. Something's come a year late. We saw it with Virginia in the NCAA tournament. They were the number 1 seed overall and then lost to UMBC in the first round in the biggest upset in NCAA history. You could argue that happened to the Lightning last year, and it just fuels them, and they work. I see videos every day of Stamkos, Kucherov, Cirelli, Shattenkirk, McDonough. They're all working so hard, and I see them pulling through this year. It's hard not picking the Rangers, but like everything was gravy for them. The Lightning are just so talented.
So we go from a possible Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup to Tampa Bay in the NFL. people in Tampa will definitely have something to cheer about this
Yeah,
fall if
and
that
they
comes
have
to
a
fruition.
exactly, and they have a good NFL and an MLB team in the Tampa Bay Rays. They're pretty good.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the NHL before we sign off for today, Jake?
Nikita Kucherov will win the Conn Smythe, which is the Finals MVP.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your analysis, predictions, thoughts, Jake.
Thank you for
This
having
was
me.
this was great. We will do this again sometime. Maybe we'll do a little recap after the play-in round, talk
Yeah,
about
definitely.
what went on. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening to the Shack Podcast Network. We will be back later this week, maybe next week, with some more content for you. Remember, check out theodshack.com for all our new stuff, and have a great rest of your day.